Good morning. Normally I do these in the evening. This is a special morning show on this Friday morning. I am joined by Sarah Joy Albrecht from Hold My Guns. And Hold My Guns is one of the organizations so clearly sets the best light on gun owners and the idea that gun owners care, not to steal gunownerscare.org from NSSF, but NSSF is proving that gun owners care literally and figuratively now that they have that website, as have many people. And I think that's a great place to start, Sarah, this morning as we talk about speaking with people outside of the gun community. Real quick, kind of tell everybody about Hold My Guns, how you got into gun rights advocacy and specifically the advocacy around Hold My Guns, and then where you think that hits this intersection I'm talking about with outreach.
Well, good morning. You're asking some great questions, and I love being in this space. I care about people and I care about life. And when we lost a 18-year-old friend to suicide by firearm a couple years ago, the community reached out to me. I'm a range safety officer, and they said, "We're really grieving. You know, we love our friend, we miss her. What can we do to support families who have firearms and they might need to get help?" But there's a lot of legal barriers and obstacles to doing that. And so it motivated me to found Hold My Guns. We partner with FFLs, gun shops, you know, which include ranges and pawn shops as well, and gunsmiths, to provide off-site firearm storage for mental health crisis or for whatever reason, because we know that whether a person is storing firearms because they're experiencing suicidal ideations, or they're going on an extended vacation and they don't want unauthorized access, or maybe they're, you know, they're going to be deployed for a little while. They don't want their firearms stolen and used in a crime later on, or an accidental shooting. You know, what if you have the grandkids coming in, or what if there are foster care kids that you're helping to house, provide emergency housing for? You don't want them to, you know, especially a kid who might not have a background in firearms like our kids do, you know, you don't want them to have unauthorized access and accidentally harm themselves or someone else. So that is the heart of what we do with Hold My Guns. And it was started, you know, because of that intersection, that conversation of, we really care about firearms, we care about civil rights, but we also, the whole heart, why do we care about those things? Because we care about life. And so there really is no dichotomy between freedom and safety, and really there's no division between compassion either. We can certainly use compassion when we talk to people. So I'm glad to be here, and I did see your Affirm series, and I commend you. I know some of the faces who also participated in that, and I thought that the conversation was very respectful, and they asked great questions of you as you represented our community. So I'm proud of you for that. And you should know it's being shared in the Philadelphia area. The Lethal Means group was sharing that very video this morning. I was like, hey, cool. So the reach is out there.
Yeah, it's been really interesting working with people from outside of the gun community to help reduce the for negative outcomes. You know, it's something that you guys obviously are heavily involved in the way you just explained. It's not just suicide. With Walk the Talk America, with us, it does revolve all around mental health, but that doesn't always mean just suicide as well. It could, for example, and you know, the kind of idea that I've always said, you know, if you're going to take the car keys away from grandpa or from your dad, maybe you have to think about whether that loaded shotgun should be behind the door as well. And that's a really serious conversation in the gun community, and Hold My Guns, Walk the Talk America, NSSF, everybody that's involved in that conversation has to be sensitive to the emotions around it. And that's a big part of this outreach issue is being, who was I just talking with just a couple of days ago that really emphasized this idea of being sensitive to the emotional impact. Everything that you're doing revolves around emotion as well, because it's not just the emotion of the Second Amendment rights and the defense of those rights and everything that we talk about in the gun community, but it's defense of life, it's defense of people. And that's a great place to kind of jump into the outreach, right? So here we are talking about what happens when a gun rights advocate speaks with someone who is anti-gun or pro-gun control, or maybe even just neutral on it, but skeptical, and they say to you, okay, well, you know what, you seem like a nice person, you say you care about people, wouldn't the world be better off if there weren't so many guns? You know, where do you go with that kind of a comment? Because I'm sure you've heard that before once or twice.
I sure have. Um, I first of all, whenever I speak, and I've given public testimony, I'm part of a number of committees on firearm injury prevention in Pennsylvania with the VA. Whenever I speak, especially to a new audience, just to bring it back to the heart of that, I always start out by saying, I'm doing what I'm doing because we lost someone who we love. And I don't know who's in the audience today, but if you've lost someone who you love, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sad about that. And that's why I'm here to help to prevent future losses that could have, been their unnecessary losses. And I always start out from that angle. It's really important to always bring it back to that human element and to compassion. That's why we're doing what we're doing in the first place. Gun rights matter because people matter, and we want for people to be able to protect themselves and their families. So I hear things all the time like, if we could just get, if we could just create some legislation and get, guns off the street and this kind of a thing. But by the street, really what they mean is whenever you're enacting a law, you're basically enacting it against law-abiding citizens. And so I do try to bring it back to that, to say, well, we do have a lot of laws on the books currently, but I live in a very rough area where people don't purchase firearms from a store. They sell them on the street, so they trade them for drugs. There's a whole different way to get firearms than what legislation can even touch. So I try to bring it back to that. Like, let's try to emphasize, laws that actually prosecute criminals and don't just let them out on bail and have them walking the streets. We have that happen all the time where I live. We're kind of on the outskirts of Philadelphia. So anyway, I think it's important to bring it back to that. Another thing when I talk to folks in that setting is, I say, you're right, I really do care. And, I know that you care too. Tell me a little bit about why you're in advocacy to reduce violence and to reduce suicide. And it's really important to create that human connection. It's not just you're a nice person, but it's like, I care. It's, like nice can be a weird saccharine word that's a wishy-washy word, but I really try to get to the heart of it. And then as I listen, then I can kind of get an idea of why are they approaching it the way that they have. And a lot of times in people's story, they'll say things like, I was really worried about these things, and then I found Everytown for gun safety, or I found Ceasefire, or I found Gifford's Courage. And, I started reading about that, and then I realized all these things. And then I try to say, okay, and then I have an idea. All right, where are they getting their information from? And then I start to move them to other sites to like, hey, have you considered, the NSSF and the AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention? They've created some materials that are really powerful, that really get to the heart of, firearms safety and of suicide prevention. Have you had a chance to look at these, And I find the reaction a lot of times is that people are shocked. They don't realize that our beautiful community has put together resources that actually are, they are respectful to gun culture. And when I talk to people, I don't know if I had posted last week on the Hold My Guns Instagram. But, we hear the term gun violence a lot. And even the group that you're speaking with this week, that's, gun violence injury prevention. I understand. And from a very clinical perspective, those are the terms that they're using. Right. Those groups a lot of times have been influenced by some of those other groups that we just mentioned. And so they believe that they're using the right terms. And so I think it's really important to first understand why they're using the terms that they're using, but then also kind of turn it on its head, because when you're talking about mental health, like, wow, we really want to reach gun owners. When we're trying to reach a client, we don't want to trigger them and push them away from getting help, right? Well, when we use the term gun violence, what we're doing is we're equating suicidal ideation with someone plotting to rob a bank with an armed robbery, because you're lumping them together in gun violence. And we're basically telling our high risk group of people, a lot of times veterans, we wouldn't want to hurt veterans. We want them to be able to, they served our country. We need to serve them. We want them to be able to have resources and to feel comfortable and have trust. So let's not use a term that really alienates the very audience who you're trying to reach out to. And let's try to change the messaging. And people get on me about that, Rob. You know, they say, well, it's just a matter of massaging words. But what I have found is that words are very important, and they are used in a way, especially this dangerous term, gun violence, which John Lott has written a lot about. When you can lump everything together, then you create this like amalgam of all of these scary things, and you use that in full force to have gun control. And so if we can chip away at some of that language, it actually does change policy, because you can't lump together 2/3 of deaths from suicide in with armed robbery. So it's really important that we're always splitting. You know, we have to push back on those terms, but in a respectful way and understanding the people we're talking to.
And that's so important, right? So this terminology is a big deal. Some of the people involved in that panel yesterday and I have co-authored a paper that was just submitted to a medical journal about a week ago on terminology, the terminology guide for physicians, for people in the medical field trying to do any kind of, advocacy to their patients, or maybe investigations about, dangers, pediatrics, things like that. And
yes.
Obviously I contributed the part about the firearms, right? And kind of what to talk about and what not to talk about, what the trigger words are. There were also issues of suicide prevention and then group violence issues for inner city affected youth, especially. Yeah. And three of us put this together. I'm excited to see where it goes. If it doesn't get published in the journal, we'll probably publish it at the 2AO blog or something. We'll still put it out. And these terminology issues are important. Now, I get a lot, actually yesterday, disappointingly, the very first comment when the recording from the Rethink, and I'll put a link under this at the YouTube to that recording so people can see it. The very first comment was about the gun violence, because the title is Rethink, and we're talking about how we discuss firearms injury prevention and gun violence. And there's a quandary there, because, and I talked about this on the Gun Experiment podcast last night, because we were talking about ghost guns. We were talking about 3D printed guns and do your own guns and build your own guns, gun making, gun kits, all this stuff. And this term ghost gun is being used very pejoratively. Obviously, it's a scary term to insinuate that all.
Isn't John Hopkins even putting out some survey right now about ghost guns? Yeah.
They reached out to me. So what we were sharing, so now I'm talking with them too about some of the terminology, but this is things, right? And it's like, the guys were talking about, they actually said to me, Rob, you're doing 3D printing and all this, and let's talk about ghost guns. Are we allowed to talk about ghost guns? Can we say ghost guns? And I said, well, here's the problem if we don't say ghost guns. And you hit on this earlier. Where are you getting your information? Well, if someone goes to the news, or somebody's, scanning the channels and they see a story about ghost guns, and they say, well, that sounds scary. And maybe they're skeptical. Maybe they want to become an advocate against them. I don't know what they want, but they hear that word. What word are they going to put into their search engine? Ghost guns. And if the gun community is avoiding that term, guess what they're going to find? They're going to find Giffords, and they're going to find Moms Demand Action, and they're going to find Everytown, and they're going to find Biden's speech, and they're going to find Harris talking about the criminals when she was a prosecutor using ghost guns that turned into a prosecutor, but she'll find a way, right? And it's like so that's the problem we've got, is if we pretend these terms are verboten inside of our community, now we can't refute the concept. So when this is the group that I'm working on terminology with, they're very sensitive to the fact that our community does not like the term gun violence for a whole bunch of very good and valid reasons. But at the same time, if we're trying to influence the people in the medical community, they're looking about gun violence. And it's
grants that are funding them. These research groups, they have astronomical grants from the CDC and other, large entities and they are using the term gun violence in those grants.
Right.
So again, they're getting their information, but to your point, if they're verboten, then how can we even interact with them if we're just like, la la, I'm not gonna say gun violence. And I appreciate that comment that, like that you're bringing up that comment that a lot of times, unfortunately with the gun community, they see a phrase like that and then they just shut it down and they clog up all the chat and there's not productive conversation that's happening.
And
But
that
the reality, go ahead.
yesterday was, the first person in, well, there is no such thing as gun violence. Guns can't be violent. And it's like, okay, so what I've done, and I'm trying to get people to understand, like, I get it, but we have to get people into the conversation and then explain to them there is gun involved violence or firearm involved violence, just like there's firearms involved suicide, firearms involved injury. And it's, if you think after 30 years and running to a that I'm demonizing guns as if the gun's going to jump off the table and commit an act of violence, you're not paying attention. And we have to get an extra step or two to get people into the conversation. So the terminology thing is really important. How do you then coach? Because I know you have a lot of people saying, how can I help? Right. And I see it all the time, right? How can I help? How can I reach out? How can I talk to my gun shop about holding my guns? How do you help coach other people in the gun community who don't get it? The people that are saying, well, that's just, if you say it's okay for someone to give up their guns, then the government's going to say people need to give up their guns. And they make this huge leap from what you're doing to legislation that would take people's guns away, take people's rights away. How do you deal with that conflict in people's minds?
I love that question. First of all, whenever you're talking with people, you're interacting in a space, it's very important to know what you believe and why. And when you go in and you're talking to a gun shop, or you're talking to someone who is concerned about suicide prevention, that whole list, violence, violence prevention. You need to know what you believe and why, and you need to understand that it comes back to that firearms is a right that's diversely exercised. We have a right to protect ourselves. Having that right is diversely exercised and using it. And so then, that's a given. And I'm not challenging that at all. And in fact, part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because the laws are such that, a person who doesn't take care of things when they're small and when they're private, they become public matters. That is exactly what happened in the case that I used to or decided to hold my guns under. And so when we're having that conversation with folks, I really take it from that angle. And that is like, if we do not take leadership on this issue and we are silent, then someone else is going to steal our voice. And that means we have to be willing to go in and have difficult conversations with groups like you did, although I know some of the ladies on there are actually really decent, friendly ladies who are trying, they want to understand. But, we have to look at it from that perspective. I'm a leader on this, and leaders they're going to get hit. They're the first ones out there, and they're like, let's go do this, guys. So I just take it in stride, and I understand that that these conversations are really important. You asked a question about that we're taking leadership on it. You asked a question about what do you say when someone says, what if that leap? What if someone stores a firearm and then it becomes law that you have to store a firearm offsite? I do think that that can be a leap, but you have to understand too. Ideally, people wouldn't have to have their firearms stored. Ideally, they would have friends and family who are also gun owners who have a large gun safe, and I could call someone up and say, we're having some issues here, or I'm getting ready to move. Some of our firearms in our collection, we have a larger collection. They're stored with a relative right now who has a firearm safe, and they have a license to carry firearms. So in the state of Pennsylvania, that's okay. But not everybody has friends or family like we're blessed to have. So in an ideal world, we wouldn't really need hold my guns. But the thing is that sometimes we can get so lost in an ideal that we lose sight of what is the practical application and how can we have something available to people who don't have friends and family. And even if you do have friends or family who say, hey man, yeah, I'll store your firearm for you, you don't know if they have a firearm safe in their home, if they're just bringing a firearm into the home and they have little kids in the home and all of a sudden they have access to your gun? Or what if you're in a situation where you have someone who's legally allowed to store that firearm? Again, you need a license to carry for a pistol to store that in Pennsylvania, not for a long gun, but so it's in accordance with your state and local laws. But that person is not trustworthy and they are gossip. And now all of a sudden they're telling everyone, I have Sarah's gun. She's, like that kind of thing. Or, hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Yeah, they're really struggling with suicide and suicidal ideations, and I'm storing their firearms. No one wants their personal business, put out there like that. So, we have to be sensitive to the fact that not everybody has access to the same family resources and trustworthy people. And so we don't want for there to be a problem in that situation. And that's why it's ideal to partner with gun shops. Gun shops care about rights. And in the contract that we have, that we partner with the gun shops, and then we have a customer facing contract. There's a section in there that, that the only reason why a person, that any information would be given is if there is a court order, and then in our contract, it has to be sealed. We don't want, information to be out there. We really went the extra mile to protect personal information, which is a little bit of a tangent, but privacy is a big issue. And so, a lot of folks, when they talk about why would I want to store a firearm at a gun shop, it's in their best interest to protect their customers' privacy. It's in their best interest to do right by their customer and make sure that they're taken care of, and also to be a light in their community, to take leadership on these issues. You really can't, when you have a city who's trying to push gun control and they're like, nobody's doing anything, and you say, actually, that gun shop over there is doing something, it really undermines their argument. And so just kind of going back to, that original question there, why should we do this? Isn't it just elite? People are always going to try to misuse things, but man, do we have a much more solid foundation if we're actually standing up and saying, no, we're taking leadership on this. These gun shops are helping out. And by the way, they're coordinated with a local VA, the local mental health professionals, law enforcement, and to work with the community to channel them to that gun shop and say, here's a good source of information. If you're a gun owner, you should work with these guys. They will help you out. And by the way, they have great classes and such too.
So let's take the last piece of the puzzle. We have about, 8-10 minutes to finish this up. The last piece of the series, the last question in this series is the people in the gun community who would put up walls, the people in the gun community who would say, no, if you're even tolerating a conversation with someone who's pro-gun control, or if you're a gun owner saying, I don't have a problem with like red flag laws, because this is another intersection, right? In Colorado, they just put out a report of the first year of ERPO, the red flag law. I think it was attempted to be used about 120 times, and there were some like 60 uses, and in only some percentage of those, let's say half, firearms, I think it was actually significantly less than half, firearms were actually quote unquote confiscated, because the option is you give them to a trusted friend that can legally have them, or you take them to a gun shop, and that option was taken almost every time. So again, I think the way I always put it is, if we don't take responsibility for these issues, someone else is going to legislate responsibility upon us.
Yeah.
As far as red laws go, obviously, I'm not a fan of red flag laws. 2AO is not a fan of red flag laws, but the Colorado one is actually written pretty well. It even includes penalties for abuse. It includes a court-appointed lawyer. It includes the being, put with a trusted person or with a gun shop. So if someone says, and there are gun owners out there, say, I don't have any problem with that, how do you deal with them? And then, maybe something towards, what about the people in the gun community that aren't having these conversations? Because I think that's an important part of this outreach advocacy issue too.
It's a delicate situation, because you said, what if it's a gun owner who is kind of on the fence about those kinds of things? And I think it's important for us to provide a solution that respects rights and due process, and hopefully can encourage people to get help before it comes to a situation where law enforcement would ever be involved, where family would ever be involved. And I think it's really important to have a personal safety plan. You know, we have that with our kids for when we travel or whatever, or when I've had a couple surgeries, like here's the emergency contacts, here's what to do if I am having these medical issues, here's who you need to call. It's a really good idea for gun owners to have a safety plan that's individualized, so that if there ever is a situation like that, the family's not thinking, what do I do? Do I call the police? Actually, no, Sarah has a plan that these are the people that is going to call. And, I know that they're going to be able to talk to her and say, hey, Sarah, like, I don't know what's up with you right now, but we're concerned about these things. And then having a personal agreement with yourself. And what that does is it gives the gun owner the control over the driver's seat, because they've already thought about these things when they're of sound mind, when they're doing well, when life isn't crazy. And so I encourage people to do that too, to have that personal safety plan before things really hit the fan. And you talked about, like, how do you even have a conversation with these people? I've really been encouraged by the story of Daryl Davis, who was an African-American man, and he actually befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan, and he sat down with them and had dinner with them and talked to them, and they realized, wow, this guy's, he's human, he's wonderful, we care about him, we can actually call him our friend. I believe it was over 200 of the Klansmen that actually decided they don't want to do that anymore, just from having a relationship with him, because he was willing to talk about it, and he was willing to stand up and say, I'm not a scary guy. I'm a person in your community, and I care about what's going on, and I'm willing. He went to Klans meetings. He was willing to go and put himself in a dangerous situation because he knew what he believed and why. And he believed that if he could go out there and change people's minds, it was worth it to him. And he's a hero, So I appreciate that it's a scary thing, and not everybody's called to stand in the fray like that, like Daryl Davis. But I feel like I'm willing to do it because I feel solid about what I believe. And I also know that it's important not to just go in and be all talk. It is important to go in with a plan. And so something that I've realized, I would really like the folks listening to consider this. The way that it works is we talk about, like, call your elected officials and tell them we're against this bill or we're for this. And there is definitely value in that. However, it goes back even farther than that. So basically what happens is you have, like, city council type people, and those city council people, the members of the community come to city council meetings, and they're like, there was just a murder on Lincoln Highway, and this happened right outside of so-and-so's store, and what are we doing about this? And the city hall, is full of people who want change. So what happens is then groups like Gifford's Law, Everytown, Ceasefire, they have people in the community, and then they bring in a community action plan. And I learned about this because here in Pennsylvania, I'm working in communities to network with gun shops so that we can have situations like I talked about a moment ago with law enforcement, right? So I started to go to the Pennsylvania Department of Public Health and Injury Prevention and in Pennsylvania. And on their website is listed Everytown, Ceasefire, Gifford's Courage, because they've already infiltrated our public health system because it's a public health issue. And again, John Lott has written a lot about that. So here's what we need to do. We need to have an action plan that is pro-rights, and we need to make it beautiful and glossy, and we need to stop cowering and being afraid, but we need to take a page from Daryl Davis, and we need to say we're willing to have this conversation. And by the way, here's our beautiful gun safety stuff. Here are our local instructors. We care about reducing injury and suicide and the whole list, accidental shootings, and also to prevent violence. We care about things like de-escalation classes and how do we have a conversation so that we're not in anger hurting somebody else. Here's what we're doing to address the heart of some of these issues. And here are some trusted people. If you can present that in a professional, beautiful way to your city council and say, and we're already doing these things, right, and it's not going to cost you anything, we would love to have you come join us. that is winsome. And we have to be willing to present ourselves in unity, with professionalism, and with a listening ear.
I think that's a great summary of the kind of advocacy outreach that Second Amendment organization is wanting to do. But and I do appreciate you. You are one of the most sincere people in this space. You come at this, I think, with a very clear interest in helping people, as you said, preserving life. That's why most of us have these guns, about defensive use of guns. It's to protect myself, protect my daughter, protect anybody I care about when I need to. Firearms
Yes.
do that, and I think there are people who lose track a little bit in defense of their right, and as you said, kind of cowering in fear. Really brave and can look really intimidating, but if you're not brave enough to take the plate carrier off, put on a dress shirt, and go into that city council meeting and actually have a conversation about what the Second Amendment community is doing, then we may be forced to do things that we really don't want to be doing, right? We don't want to have to fight against law. We don't want to have to go into the courts. We certainly don't want to have to deal with, a door-to-door confiscation scenario. But I really think the only way to get there is by not having the kinds of conversations that you're having, which does take real bravery and really comfort zone and outside of that echo chamber. So thank you for that. As I said, I'm going to stop. There are a couple people asking where this is going to be available to be shared. I'm going to immediately throw it into my IGTV, but then I will chop it down 35 minutes, get rid of the out, get rid of the, and put this out through the series we're doing with Second Amendment organization. Real quick, tell everybody follow you and find out more information about the projects you're involved in.
Thank you. This is my personal Instagram channel. If you're interested in following Hold My Guns, you can find us online at holdmyguns.org, and then also on social media, holdmyguns.org. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook under that holdmyguns.org. And there is a place on our website where gun shops can sign up. It says become a storage partner. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I'll put all these links underneath of that. And what you said there at the end, I think is important, right? There's this idea of, you used the word infiltrating earlier, right? And there's obviously that's a nefarious kind of pejorative word, but there is something walking into that room, as you said, like was Davis walked into the Klan meeting, he infiltrated, right? Now he didn't like put the on and sneak in, but he showed up and he's just like, I'm here with it, and I do think it's important, and I don't know, there's somewhere there is a comfort that has to be established for when you are in that city council meeting. If you put some game of choose, right? You can either put a link to Everytown or you can put a link to Hold My Guns. I think if they want to put the Everytown, they put the Everytown. I want them to put the Hold My Guns. I want them to put Walk the Talk America. I want them to put NSSF and Second Amendment organization.
Sometimes it will be a mixed bag.
It's got to be a mixed
Our audience has to know that. Sometimes a city group is going to put Hold My Guns, Walk Talk America, and Everytown. We don't have control over that. But as long as we're having that conversation, we have a foot in the door, and that is a win. That is living in the trenches, being willing to, again, how do you have comfort in a city council meeting? How do you infiltrate or blend in? You said it, put on a nice shirt. Don't go in there with a shirt that talks about, like really flexing about gun rights and that has skulls on it and stuff. Put on your nice shirt.
I did think it was interesting that Grunt Style actually put out a statement after January 6th and said, yeah, they were wearing our shirts, but that's not our people. I thought that was really important. And so I think distancing sometimes even in the community of, yeah, that's not us. We have to be able to say that us is 100 million people. And if there's 3 million noisy people over here, you might even find 3 million gun owners that are okay with magazine capacity bans and assault weapon bans and whatever else. Guess what? Those aren't us either, right? There's that core middle that are the silent majority that really feel strongly about owning guns and protecting our gun rights, but also protecting people.
Yes.
Thank you for all the work you do, and I will be sure to get you the link as soon as this gets edited and put up on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Back at you, Rob. Have a great day.